So I want to talk about Bitcoin as a technology because something very exciting is happening. Something that's going to shake up the financial and banking system as much as cars shook up the horse industry, as much as oil shook up the whaling industry, as much as electricity shook up the wood stove industry. Banking is about to be disrupted. Arguably, it's already being disrupted. In fact, by the time they figure out how serious this disruption is, the game's already over. That's usually the case. When you look at established trends industries, they see a new disruptive technology, and at first they ignore it because it can't possibly pose a threat. Because from the benefit of incumbency, from the high perch of an established monopolistic business, these threats look like children playing around. To JP Morgan Chase, Bitcoin is like a lemonade stand trying to take on Walmart. But if they continue to do that, then they go into the next phase where they start mocking the technology, where they suddenly see it everywhere and they start making jokes about it. So, just like with the automobile, the first people who bought cars were mocked because they were shown always on their knees with a spanner trying to fix their machine that had broken down again. That was the image of an automobile owner in the first years. And so while they mock it, Bitcoin continues to grow and continues to improve. And after a while, you see a change. At first, some of the incumbents in the industry say, hey, maybe we need to experiment with this. Maybe we need to start looking at this. And then there's a stampede, because suddenly they realize this is going to change our industry forever. By that time, it's too late. By that time, you're Kodak, going from number one in the world to within 3 years, losing a $12 billion industry right out from under their feet to a company they'd never heard of before. A company that didn't even make cameras. Do you know who destroyed Kodak? A little Finnish company they'd never heard of called Nokia. A company that didn't make cameras until they did. And within 3 years, they made 500 million cameras and destroyed Kodak. Tower Records dominated the music industry, and then within 4 years, they disappeared. Why? Because MP3 gave people choice. IBM used to be the most unshakable company in computers. They guaranteed quality. In fact, buying anything but IBM was a sure sign that you were a loser. And then Linux happened. And Linux shook IBM to its core because it subverted the very basic idea that in order to deliver quality of engineering and in order to deliver the best computers possible for the serious work of banking and engineering and government operations, you needed IBM. You needed a closed, controlled, carefully organized system built by serious PhD engineers. Now, if you look back in 1992 when Linus Torvalds said, I'm going to build an operating system in my dorm room because I can't afford to buy an operating system, that idea seemed completely preposterous. Operating systems were enormous edifices of complexity that it took thousands of engineers to build. And Linus Torvalds started simple and started building an operating system. 6 years later, Linux had started dominating the computing industry, and Sun Microsystems was beginning to feel the pain. 8 years later, Sun Microsystems was heading to bankruptcy. HP was getting bought. Their computer division was shutting down, and IBM stepped out of the personal computing business. And now, 80% of the cell phones on the planet run Android, which, by the way, is Linux. And the servers they connect to run Linux. And the banks we use run Linux. And the entertainment systems we use run Linux. And the cars we drive run Linux. You can always tell if it's not running Linux. It's a little blue screen that greets you. It says, sorry, crashed. Wrong choice of operating system. You get into a plane, the entertainment system boots up, it's running Linux. If you said to an IBM engineer 15 years ago, you are about to be destroyed by an operating system built by a Finnish student in their dorm, they would have laughed at you. And so here we are today, and Bitcoin is taking on the entire banking system, the most powerful industry in the world. And guess what? Bitcoin's going to win. And it's going to win for a very simple reason. It's not just going to win because it's better. It's not just going to win because the banking system is run by gangsters and crooks and some of the most immoral, empty suits in the world. It's not just going to win because the banking system has spent the last 50 years delivering two consumer innovations, ATMs and credit cards, and then spent the rest of the time trying to figure out how to fleece you. It's going to win because it's open. And in a world of tinkerers, and in a world of experimenters, and in a world of makers, open wins. And the reason it wins is because it allows innovation to flourish at the edges. Let me explain what I mean by that. Every single financial system in the world has a security and trust model that requires excluding bad actors. I can't connect to the Visa network and program it because doing so would endanger the security of the Visa network. I can't connect to the SWIFT network, the worldwide interbank fund transfer, the wire transfer network, because doing so would endanger the security of that network. All of these networks are designed to be closed because their primary security relies on access control, on very carefully vetting every single person who has access and touches the code, and on very carefully vetting all of the applications that run on that system. Because if they allow one bad actor into the heart of the system, that security is gone. That one bad actor can take over and do whatever they want. Of course, in 2008, we discovered that the bad actors owned the banks. And they did take over. And they destroyed millions of homeowners and millions of retirees and millions of savers all around the world with their greed. But Bitcoin is different. And the reason it's different is not because we've suddenly found the most honest people in the world, or because there are no crooks in Bitcoin, or because the network doesn't get attacked. Bitcoin is different because there are plenty of crooks in Bitcoin, and the network gets attacked all the time. But it doesn't depend on access control to remain secure. It depends on a simple mathematical formula of incentives and rewards. In order to participate in the Bitcoin network and secure the network as a miner, which is a special function in Bitcoin, you have to use a lot of computing power and spend a lot of electricity. If you win that competition, you get Bitcoin as a reward. And that simple equation creates a system of incentives where it's far better to play with the rules than against the rules. It's game theory. It's like a giant game of Sudoku. Now, if you look at that as a computer scientist, or even more as a banker, you say, well, that can't possibly work. What do you mean it's a giant game of Sudoku when everybody's competing against each other? That's not the basis of a security system. That would bring chaos. It's kind of like saying, what do you mean it's an encyclopedia that anyone can edit? That would bring chaos, said Encyclopedia Britannica. If you're under 40, you've never heard of it. Bitcoin is a completely open network. Anyone can connect to it. You can write an application right now and connect to the Bitcoin network and teach it to do something new. You can write a new financial service. You can write a new financial instrument. And when you do so, you don't have to identify yourself to the network. You don't have to get permission from anyone. You don't have to be vetted. You don't have to be secured. And the network doesn't fear you because its security doesn't depend on keeping bad actors out. In fact, Bitcoin works fine with plenty of bad actors right in the core of the system. There is no core in the system. There is no center. It's a completely decentralized system. And so what happens when you create a network where open access to financial services is possible for the first time in history, where anyone can connect and write an application? Bitcoin isn't currency. And that's a really important thing to realize. Currency is an app that runs on the Bitcoin network. Bitcoin is the internet of money, and currency is just the first app. And today, there are 1,000 companies writing the next app. And those companies are hiring tens of thousands of people in one of the most vibrant industries we have seen in the last 2 decades. In 2014, Bitcoin is receiving more than $250 million of investment, and the startup companies within it. And what's remarkable about that is that is faster than the rate of investment on the internet in 1995. We are ahead of the curve. Bitcoin is growing faster than Twitter did in the first 3 years. Bitcoin is growing faster than Facebook grew in the first few years. And the reason for that is because every misfit, weirdo, freak, programmer from anywhere in the world can now connect to Bitcoin without asking anyone's permission and take their weirdo, misfit idea and build a new financial service, a new banking application, a new shopping application, a new escrow application. And that's exactly what people are doing. They're building things that are innovative and new and brilliant, things we've never seen in banking before, things that wouldn't get past the first planning meeting in your average bank because they'd get shot down. And so when you have these two environments running side by side, a banking environment where everything requires permission, and permission is most certainly not granted, and a system which is completely open, where innovation can happen at the edge without permission, guess who wins? Guess where all of the exciting things happen? Guess where all of the innovation happens? And this is innovation that serves consumers. No one is sitting on Bitcoin and trying to find a way how to front-run a high-frequency trading algorithm so they can squeeze 3 microcents about 4 microseconds faster than the other giant bank that's playing with algos. No one's trying to find a way to screw you out of your overdraft facility. An innovation that was pioneered by one of the big banks in, I think it was 2007, where they realized that if you were close to your overdraft limit, if instead of running the big transaction first, they flipped the order of the transactions and ran a lot of the small ones, you'd pay a $25 fee for every one of them, and they could maximize their fees. That's the kind of innovation they were focused on. So they innovated. They innovated more and more ways to screw their customers. And on Bitcoin, nobody's doing that kind of innovation. And the reason they're not doing that kind of innovation is because Bitcoin, you can't force someone to take your app. If you bank with a big bank, it's their network, it's their policy, you're using their debit card and playing by their rules, and if you don't like it, you can go elsewhere and discover that they're all the same. On Bitcoin, it's an opt-in system. You choose to use it. You choose what apps you're going to run. You choose who you're going to interact with, and you choose the rules of the game by which you're going to interact. And if you don't like an app, you don't download it. And if you love an app, you download it and you tell all your friends about it. And that's why Bitcoin is going to win. because it delivers innovation that consumers want and consumers need. And there's another reason. Because there's a massive imbalance that most people here don't notice. Every person in this room has access to a bank account without currency controls. A bank account from which they can buy and sell any currency in the world. A bank account from which they can wire money anywhere in the world. A bank account from which they can access international markets like the Tokyo Stock Exchange or the German Stock Exchange. A market from which they can access credit and liquidity, auto loans and mortgages. A bank account which is powerful, and that power is available to about 1 billion people on this planet. 1 billion people who have access to full-fledged, international, high-liquidity banking facilities. There's 2 billion people who have no bank accounts at all, and there's another 4 billion people who have very, very limited access to banking. Banking without international currencies, banking without international markets, banking without liquidity. So Bitcoin isn't about the 1 billion. Bitcoin is all about the other 6.5 million. The people who currently are cut off from international banking. What do you think happens when you suddenly are able to turn a simple text messaging phone in the middle of a rural area in Nigeria, connected to a solar panel, into a bank terminal, into a Western Union remittances terminal, into an international loan origination system, into a stock market, into an IPO engine? At first nothing, but give it a few years.